Welcome to the first ever episode of Just the Chat With. I'm Andrew Dobby, this is Astro.
And I'm Lewis Phillips.
As co-founders of Born Original and running two creative studios, Made Brave and Campfire, we love nothing more than sitting down and talking about branding, design, tech and creativity.
In this series, we'll be speaking with some inspirational people who are all at the top of their game.
We'll be talking about their creative processes, the journey they've been on so far, and they'll be sharing some tips of how they got to where they are today.
In this episode, we sit down with Noah Klocek, who is an artist and film designer at Pixar, and also works as an illustrator and author of a children's book series.
Noah's had an amazing career to date, playing vital roles in films such as Up, Brave, WALL-E and Shrek 2. He joined us a couple of weeks ago in our studio for a chat.
So you obviously are at Pixar now. Could you tell us a bit about the journey and the route that took you?
I said this in my talk the other day, but my parents were hippies. And I don't know if you know about Waldorf education. It started in Germany, but now it's over in the States. And it's kind of, they both ended up teachers in Waldorf, and my dad was a professor at the Realtime college. Like, they were really into that. And one of the things that he preached was we want to make whole human beings. And so arts and math and science and all those things are important to you being a whole human being. And so my parents kind of took that philosophy to the extreme and were like, you don't need other media. You need to go out in the world and play outside and do all those things. And so we didn't have a TV in our house. Still, my parents don't have a TV in their house. Like, they watch Netflix occasionally on their computers, but that was kind of the upbringing I got. And so my media was children's books. And so I actually went to art school to do children's books. I didn't even really think film was a job. But I guess when I was in high school, Lion King came out, which was 1996.
I'm a big Lion King fan. Huge Lion King fan.
But it changed the industry because it made a ton of money and they didn't know what to do with it. And then when I remember in high school reading a newspaper, there was an article that said giving $100,000 bonuses to people who can hold a pencil. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? But I didn't really connect the two things until I went to school. And the program I went to San Jose State. And the program was changing from like editorial illustration to film illustration and design for film and animation. They have some animation, but really they're really strong in concept art as a program. And so I kind of made that transition with them. I was like, oh, I can make more money and I can still do art. And I've always loved children's books. I still do it in my free time, but that was kind of the beginning of that. And then we're close to like ILM and Pixar, and that's about it up in the Bay Area. And I was lucky enough, I was probably in my last year of school. ILM was looking for junior matte painters, and I didn't even know what matte painting was, but I had a lot of paintings in my portfolio, and so I turned it in, and they're like, yeah, come in. So I actually left school to do that and finished on the weekends. And it was a great opportunity, but I was like a wrist. It was like, here is a plate, make it look better. And it was very hierarchical there. And so if you came in last, these are people who made Star Wars. So they didn't want to hear from you and your thoughts on it. And I remember a lot of the special effects supervisors were people who had no artistic background, but they'd just been there since the beginning of time. And so I was in one review and it was on the Hulk, the first Hulk. And they had asked me to put a fake movie screen, an outdoor movie screen in this shot. And the eager little beaver that I was for the time, I was like worrying about bounce light and the color of the wall on the other side and all this stuff and put it in the shot. And the special effects supervisor came in and was kind of rationalizing his job and said, hey, can you make it green? And I was like, but it can't because the bounce light and my lead was like, no, you shut up, make it green. And I was like, oh, I'm in the wrong place. So, and then they let me go. So that was the other part. So like last one in, first one out when they did layoffs. And then I luckily got picked up to do matte painting at DreamWorks, which was great because that got me into animation.
Is it easy to get a job, or is it, is there a big process?
Oh no, it was terrifying. I had 3 months without work, and I thought I'm never going to work in the industry again. And ironically, game studios didn't want to hire me because I was coming from ILM. And they thought, there's something wrong with you if you're coming from ILM and want to work in a game company. And I was like, I just want to do cool stuff. So literally a game company, I went to a convention and they were like, no, you don't want to work at our game company. I was like, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. So I was terrified. But then again, I got lucky and someone knew somebody and I sent in my portfolio and they hired me.
And what does that process look like when you get in? Because sometimes sometimes straight away someone's great, and you look at the portfolio and you can tell by the first page. Do they do that, or do they put you through a lot of testing?
Oh, they were pretty good because I come from ILM, and so they knew I had enough chops. Yeah. And ILM was basically, because I was a junior matte painting, they threw you in the deep end. Yeah. Technologically too, so they were like, here's Maya and some rendering package. I don't even remember what it was back then, Softimage or something like that. And they're like, you're gonna make shots, and I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And then they're like, send your final, export your layers and send it to the compositor. And I was like, what scale? What is how many pixels is our frame? I had no idea. I came from like advertising and print, so I had to learn a lot there. So DreamWorks got the benefit of that. They were like, oh, okay, you know what you're doing. And so it was pretty easy there. But then I really wanted to get out of matte painting for two reasons. One, it was a lot of long nights. So basically the process was, at the end of a production, anything that lighting or effects or anybody couldn't do, they threw to the matte department. So we'd paint it. So at one point we had a trailer going out, and the effects department said, oh, we can't do the spray water from that shot. Yeah. We just don't have time. So can matte painting do it? And I was like, no. And they were like, yes. So I spent a week there hand animating water for a trailer for Madagascar.
And were you part of a much larger team, or in the kind of?
It was like 5 of us doing it. And so you literally, at the end of a film, you were spending like 3 weeks at the studio and leaving to take showers and sleep for 2 hours. And so I was like, and you were in the dark all day, because it was color correct monitors, and you had to have it all right. And so you were in the dark in the winter time, and you'd come out and it'd be dark, and you go in and it'd be dark, and then you were there for all those hours, and I was like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna do this dark box. So, and then I wanted to be a designer, and so I started doing some design work there, and they were super happy with it, but they really liked me as a matte painter. So they would say, well, you can start in the art department, but then when it's time for matte painting, we want you to go back to the cave. And I was like, I don't want to go back to the cave. And my wife at the time, we met in school, and she was an artist as well, and she'd gotten a job at Pixar and worked her way up. So she started as like a production assistant and worked her way up into the art department. And the story is that we went to a wrap party for Madagascar and Incredibles 2 weeks apart. And at the Incredibles, at the Madagascar wrap party, Jeffrey Katzenberg got up, and all he talked about was money and toys and franchises and all of that stuff. We are going to make so much money off of this franchise. We are so excited for the toys. Did you know that McDonald's has a great tie-in with this? And we were just like, this is the worst. And then a week later, we went to The Incredibles because my wife worked on that. And like Steve Jobs, Ed Catmull, John Lasseter, and Brad Bird all got up, and no one mentioned money. They talked about storytelling and that moment that you have something that you know is the best thing you've ever done, that the world hasn't seen it yet, and you get to release it, and how exciting that moment is. And I was like, dude, I'm at the wrong
magic.
It's like the best bit of creativity, isn't
it?
Totally. You want to get to the edit, the end of it, just to show people, don't you?
That's exactly right, and just that ethos was like, what the heck? And so then I turned in my portfolio there, and I turned in all my personal work, because I didn't want to matte paint again. And so, and my nights and weekends, I've been doing children's book work. So I just collected all of like hundreds and hundreds of drawings that I've been doing, and that was my portfolio, and they liked it enough to hire me as a designer. So that was how I got into Pixar, and I worked out, first movie was WALL-E, and then I've been there 14 years.
14 years, and that's quite a good time, I suppose, and you'll have seen like lots of changes and things, and how I suppose is the creative process changing, and how has technology impacted your work? Have you seen a big shift in any way? Or?
Interestingly, the shift has been more driven not by technology, but because the technology is trying to keep up with us, almost. It's been more about the way that we work. When I came there, it was a very specialized studio, meaning everybody did something specific. So you were the best tree person in the world, and that's what you did, is the trees. But budgets and just the way that the world is working, teams are getting smaller, and people want more ownership. So you don't want to be the tree guy anymore on film number 7. You want to get a set, you want to own something and be part of that process. And I think it's a great thing. The really big move at Pixar is to be collaborative. And get everyone's voice in the room and get something. My philosophy has always been, you want something where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And if you can get that, that's where the magic is. And so it's really moved that way. And so I think that's been the driving factor. Technology has aided that in the fact that when I started, people who were doing 3D work were computer science majors because they were learning how to write software and that kind of stuff. And there was the tail end of that. But now people are coming out of art school and they're modelers in ZBrush, but they're an artist. And so that's allowed them, but they're technical. And so now this is beautiful balance between technical and art in all of these jobs. In my job, I had to get more technical and understand what's the technology coming down the line, what are the important things that are happening in the industry, you know, real-time rendering, what is that going to mean for our process, and how do we get that in our studio so we can iterate faster, all of those kind of things.
And so you don't have real-time rendering at Pixar at the moment?
We do, but it's not final,
Yeah.
right? So we have real-time rendering that is like to help process for lighters or shaders, but it's not the end result. So, you know, my dream would be something where you, when layout, put the camera in for the first time, then that shot lives. And whatever the iteration is happening, you can go to that shot at any moment and see what's the state of that shot. That would be the perfect system. So you could go to anyone's desk and be like, you know, pull up the shot, and whatever someone just did downstairs and they did shading, that showed up in the shot. And so you're really getting this iterative process that's real.
Do you think that will allow people to collaborate more? And
and we do. I mean, there's a lot of ways we get around that. We have like overnight rendering and stuff. So in the morning you come in and all the shots have been rendered. So you can do it that way. But the thing that's most exciting to me is being at someone's desk and being like, oh, that's amazing. What if we just push that light a little bit back? Oh, perfect. That's done. You know, but you can't do that. It's like, what if we push the light back? See it tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
24 hours later.
Exactly. So
pull it back again.
And I don't think it's a technology thing necessarily. I think it's a pipeline thing. There's a lot of reasons that that's good. And no one has an answer for that. It's really complicated because we have this expectation of what you see on the final frame, which has been really successful for 25, 30 years. So how do you re-engineer that? We have lots of conversations that are just about, I mean, I'm not Pixar as a whole, but just me as an individual with people in the industry, having conversations about how do you evolve when you are successful? And that's a hard thing to do because people want the hits. You know, if you're U2, play some stuff from Joshua Tree at every concert.
Same stuff
because
same formula every time.
Because people love it. So how do you mix enough stuff in? And someone told me recently this story from Spotify. They updated their algorithm with how new music was found. Everyone loved it. And so they went along with it for a while, and then they realized there was a bug in it that was playing some old music that you already knew, and they're like, get that out of there. So they removed the bug, and people hated it. Because what people want is they want the hits that they love occasionally in there, mixed with this new stuff. And so how do you find that perfect balance is a really hard thing.
How do you think like streaming and new platforms like Netflix are changing things?
I think it's great. I think Netflix is interesting. I actually just went down there a couple weeks ago just to hang out and see what was going on down there. And they're really, because they're a technology company, they think about things differently. We're very, myself just as a human being is oriented towards what is the final thing that we want to get on the screen and what is that story and all that kind of stuff. And the individuals there care about that, so the people making the content care about that. But as a studio, they're much more interested in how do we get more fodder for our data machine, right? So every show that you watch, how long you watch it, when you click away, how much you binge, all that stuff is what they want. That's why they want so much content, is to understand what you like most and so they can give you more of it, which is a very interesting way of looking at the process and was mind-blowing for me to go down there and be like, you're what? Why do you care? It's just a very different process. So how do you find a balance between my worry is that leads to high fructose corn syrup, right?
Yeah.
The McDonald's model of this is garbage for you, but we've hit all those things that are biological triggers for you to like it, your dopamine response and all that kind of stuff, and we know how to just manipulate that.
Yeah, it's like the game apps on the phone. I played them with my 7-year-old. I've got this one called Merge Planes, and it's like little planes that go around.
Yeah.
And you have to merge the numbers together, and I get a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, to proceed, I've got to gamble.
Yeah.
Like, so he's getting conditioned to gamble,
Right.
and then we win. He's like, yeah, dopamine. Yeah. And then there's like, it's like hitting every trigger that you probably shouldn't hit. Because they're not doing it for a positive way. They're doing it because they know if I get you through each one of these, eventually you need to buy more diamonds.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
that's how Facebook works.
And
too.
so do you worry, or do you think that, you know, so many people are going via this sort of data model, right? They're trying to push all these triggers when, you know, what I loved about when you were speaking the other day was, you know, that, you know, you're driven by the storytelling. And do you think that we're going so far in this way of data that eventually the true storytellers will rise to the top again? You know, and this will all drop down and it will kind of, you know, change.
That's a good question. The hipsters have given me hope, right?
Yeah.
So the hipsters have done like, well, we care about actual real food and a tool that actually works, and clothing that lasts more than 20 minutes. And so that, and back to the earth and the hipster movement, that gives me a lot of hope that human beings at some point say enough, and they reject the mass model for something that's personalized and that I care about, and that a human being made it, and I care about human beings and all that kind of stuff. So I think my hope is that yes.
It's kind of almost like when you go to Vegas, isn't it? Like, you know, for the first couple of days, you're like, wow, look at all this stuff.
Yeah.
Then after a couple of days, you're like, oh, stuff.
Yes.
And you want nature again.
Yes.
It's kind of the same as like all this data stuff. Then eventually, true creativity almost is like going to win, isn't it? You know?
I hope so. I mean, Facebook is an interesting experiment in that, right? So they went full dopamine response. That was the whole model. And so now people are like, but I feel awful. So what does that mean for human beings? You know, there's a breaking point, and so Facebook is struggling to get more users, and people are starting to abandon the platform. So what do? Do you go, okay, well, we're going to give you dopamine response in VR now, so that you're more cut off from the world? Or do we say, okay, we need to figure out a new way to do this?
Bring back a bit of the magic.
Yeah.
There was something you said the other day that sort of resonated with me. That you talked about how, you know, when you're making movies at Pixar, that, you know, where you get in trouble sometimes creatively is if you try and make the movies that you think the audience want. And like you should stay true to the stories you want to tell. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think it's in the same box as what we were just talking about. It's the same. The idea is we are human beings. It's why artists make art, right? And why you can go stand in front of Van Gogh and have an emotional response is because somebody went through that and painted those brushstrokes and for their own emotional response. And then you react to that because you can see it in the art. And that's what I think great art does. I just had lunch with Pete Docter not too long ago, and he was saying his dad was a musicologist, and he had this, I think he was listening to Stravinsky or something, and Pete Docter asked his dad, I'm not connecting this music. Why am I not connecting to this music? Why don't I understand this music? And he said, because you don't know enough about music yet. And he said, people like music that is the perfect balance of surprise and expectation. So I can hum along this tune and I know it, and I know what's coming next. People love that, but they also like to be surprised. And when they're surprised all the time, like people who don't listen to jazz, and they're surprised constantly by what's happening because they can't connect with it, they don't like it. And they reject, the jazz is just that crazy thing, because they don't know enough to follow along. And then when you understand jazz and the chord progressions that jazz has, then you can follow along and love that they're surprising you. And so I think in there is something that we're trying to do, and that's my approach. My job as an artist is to distill the world in a way that other people can digest it, because they didn't spend a lifetime looking at the way light comes into a room and understanding the meaningful parts of that. And so my job is to distill that so that they can perceive that story-wise or visually and have an emotional response to that. And that my feeling is, as artists, we're editors.
Yeah.
We're choosing the way we frame a shot so that someone can have emotional response to it. That's the challenge that VR has right now is, where am I looking, and can I control someone's emotional response if they're not looking in the character's eyes at this moment?
Yeah.
Whereas as an editor, you're like, you're looking at the damn eyes, because I'm going to light them that way, and I'm going to shoot it that way, and I'm going to cut that way.
Yeah.
And so that's our job, is to edit the world so that people can digest it.
Yeah. Where do you think the whole VR thing's going to go? Or, what's your prediction in terms of, do you think this one will live out, or do you think...
I think AR is going to be the answer.
Yeah.
I think the problem is VR is the same challenge that Facebook has, is where as soon as you isolate people, that's where there's problems. So Facebook is actually isolating people, and it wants to connect people.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that AR has the possibility of bringing people out of the home into the world to have shared experiences that they couldn't have.
Yeah. We need to get it out of a tablet first,
yes,
because we need to get it to here.
Yes.
Because I think this doesn't work for AR, does it?
It doesn't that well, but even if you had that and you could do a shared experience at a location.
Yeah.
So the only way that you can have this experience is if you all went down to green grass promenade there, and something happened, an event happened, or you could see one of the famous hangings that would happen there, and it would only happen once a day, and you could show up and everyone could see it. Then it's a shared moment and experience that you couldn't get any other way. And so everyone would show up with their iPads and be sitting here watching it, and you could take pictures in your selfie with this thing. There's a lot of opportunity for that. Or a musician's going on tour, and they send an avatar of themselves through the town on a 24-hour cycle, and if you get a selfie with them, you get a free ticket to their show. That's a shared experience. So you have people running around trying to find this person.
Trying to find nothing.
Nothing but something. And then you have a bunch of other people going, why are these people running around trying to take selfies with nothing? And this creates this human experience. And we do it with treasure hunts. There was a guy in the Bay Area a couple years ago who made a bunch of money in .com. And what he started just to do is hide money places. And he would leave this cryptic thing on his website of the location of the money. And it created this craze where people would leave their job. There's a thing. And they would go run looking for this money. And it wasn't really the money. I mean, it was like $100 or something.
It's the fact that
it was the fact that and you were problem solving, and the community was doing it. Who's going to do it first? And so I think that's the exciting part that AR can do.
There's a thing I do with my kids with Finlay. It's called geocaching. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
So you get the
similar
app,
thing.
And people hide little things everywhere, all over the world, and you have to go and try and find them. And there might be one outside here under a brick. It's the
same kind of
vibe, isn't it?
And that's the kind of dopamine response we want. Is a communal dopamine response. Where because that's how we're hardwired as community. That's why we're tribal. That's why humans do all the things that we do that we don't like, is because we are human beings and we connect with human beings. So I think there's an opportunity there. And that's why I'm excited about AR. But we'll see.
So just jumping back to your kind of creative process, I know, for me being a creative person and for us as a team, sometimes you work so hard on something, right? And then something happens, like for us, sometimes a client or the market changes, and a piece of work that you put your heart and soul into for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you've stayed up all night to do it, stops, and it stops there. I'm just wondering, when you spoke before the other night, we were talking, you're saying sometimes the films you work on, they're 4 or 6 or 8 years long. Have you ever had any really big challenges where money's dried up or investment stopped or the direction's changed or someone's left or it's just kind of, I'm just interested to know does it, because when you think of Pixar, you always just think, you just see the front end, but I'm sure there's all these challenges behind the scenes.
I think I started at DreamWorks, but my process is to always have personal work. That's the only way that I survive, because there's always something that I can say to myself, well, you can go do that and no one can tell you what to do. Or that's not going to change. No one's going to pull the funding for that because I'm funding it myself. I'm my own patron. So I go to work during the day and I love my work and it's amazing and it's fantastic. But I'm paying for that nighttime where I can do whatever the hell I want to do. And I have no responsibility between 8 and midnight. And so I can do whatever I want to do. If I want to carve wood, that's great. If I want to do performance art out in my front yard, I can do that. Whatever I want to do, I've paid for that time.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that allows me to go into work and put my heart into something and know it may get cut from the film.
Yeah.
And it happens a lot.
So tell us about kids' stories then, the books.
Yeah.
What you know, what's your kind of angle on that, and what?
Yeah, the angle is just to do art.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the angle is to tell a story that no one can tell me to do it a different way. Yeah. Of course, my editor tells me to do it a different way all the time. So my relationship to creativity is to trick myself into doing things that I have to do, because otherwise I wouldn't do anything, because it's terrifying and frustrating and hard. And so I just like cut off a little slice. So for children's books now, I know that I have this moment with me and my agent where I get to create exactly what I want. And so that moment is for me. And so I do a whole version of the book. I write it and I illustrate the whole thing out. Not final illustration, but like a dummy, and then a couple finals. And that is going to be all me. Yeah. And no one can tell me they don't like it or any of that. And then we'll send it out, and then an editor can destroy.
Do you test it on your kids?
I do. Yeah.
Do they sign it off? Are they the like?
I think their enthusiasm signs it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes they're like, yeah, cool.
Like, no, but look at it.
Yeah, totally. Like, but it's about loneliness. Do you get that? Yeah, we heard that. Yeah. So I think for that reason they're good, but they also like my stuff in general. Yeah. And I can tell the stuff that they like. My oldest daughter is super into fantasy. Yeah. Like that's her jam, and so from the youngest age, so she's just reading fantasy books constantly. She's the kid that you're like, did you feed the dog? Yeah, in a minute. I feed the dog. And I'm like, I love that you're reading, but you have to feed the dog, that kind of thing. And so anything that I do that's fantasy, she's like super into it. And the biggest actually compliment she gives me is when I catch a look at her sketchbook and she's drawing some of the stuff that I have in my book, in her book. And I'm like, all right, that connected,
And you've got a book coming out in the UK soon?
I think it just came out.
What's it called?
It's called Dreamland.
Dreamland.
Yeah, Walker Books.
Walker Books.
Released, I think, a month ago. Cool. I don't know how many copies.
And do you self-publish or?
No. Yeah, I did one self-published thing, and then I turned into a bookseller, and I was like, no, this is not what I signed up for. So I don't self-publish anymore because it's. I would just have to go to festivals all the time and sell my book. Yeah. And so I just want to spend as much time as I can creating.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to know where you get your influence from and inspiration.
Yeah. That's a good question. Other art is always inspiring. I don't go to galleries nearly enough. We're starting to again because our kids will actually go to the gallery with us for a little bit. So other artists. And I love Instagram and the internet, but there's something about going to galleries and things that are curated. And I'm trying to get into more collectives and stuff that do shows all the time that you can just go see. There's a guy, Bert Berry at my work, who he doesn't have kids and stuff, so he can do this, but he's just connected with some weird agency that's doing something over here and something that's, so I'm always like, okay, what's going on this weekend that I can hitch a ride into? They have a dinner and they just watch Fellini films and just talk about it. I'm like, dude, I want to show up to that. That sounds cool. So I want to do more of that kind of stuff because that's really inspiring. And then the other thing is nature for me. Like that's, my parents when I was young, we grew up a little bit in the country, but they would always take us up to the mountains during the summer for like 2 weeks and just say, I don't want to see you. Yeah. Go into the woods. And we'd build forts and swim in the river and just that kind of stuff. So that's always been a big inspiration for me. And not necessarily, I mean, I do a lot of painting in the woods and that kind of stuff, but more of just a place where I can just totally be me and think about my own stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Cool. And if you could give advice to yourself maybe 15 years ago and the things you've been sharing with the students you've met this week, what would it be?
Keep doing your personal work. And luckily I heeded that advice to myself, but that has been the biggest win for me. Every opportunity that I've gotten has come from my personal work. I said a little bit that I got into Pixar with my personal work, but even inside Pixar, the reason I'm production designing a movie is because I went and showed the production designer my personal work, and he was like, oh, that's interesting, what is that? And there's something about your personal work that has your heart in it more than your professional work, because the professional work is something that's polished for the world. And so it has the edges ground off it because it has to appeal to a bigger audience and that kind of stuff. And your personal work, people can see your guts in there, because it's like pure you. It's undiluted. And so there's something about that that's exciting and enticing to people. Just get a glimpse inside your head. And so that would be the advice, is not to go to university and come out and feel like I will be now a Pixar robot and we'll go in that direction, but to still have your own ideas and not lose that in university, and still, like, I don't want to see a portfolio of just projects from university. Those are great, but I want to see all those little sketches and those story beginnings you have and that kind of stuff, because that's where the good stuff is. And use the tools you're doing in school to teach you in your off time. Like when I was in school, every summer I'd give myself a challenge during the summer, and I was working at an advertising agency, so at night I would still do that. So I worked full-time in an advertising agency during the summer so that I could pay for school.
What were you, a designer in advertising?
I was a designer, and I worked through like 3 days a week during the school year, and then summer vacation I would work full-time there. I got lucky, and they were really nice to me and let me do that. They got a lot out of it. I did storyboards for them and all kinds of stuff, so they got stuff out of it. But I would still give myself these assignments during the summer, and my assignment was the thing that I was the worst at. Because I knew that if I got really good at the thing that I sucked at the most and was scared of the most, everyone else was scared of the same thing, and I would get a leg up. So like I sucked at perspective and composition, and I was terrified of it, and I just never did it. I just drew characters because I was scared of it. And I was like, I'm going to do that this summer. And I didn't have I made up my own curriculum. I looked at like comics that I liked, and I went through all the catalog of Academy Award winning cinematographers, and just pulled out their films and started watching them. And then started drawing from them, and why did they make that choice, and learned about camera lenses and how that worked. And so it just forced me to do those things. And then eventually I became a sets designer because I forced myself to learn those things. So the thing that you're scared of, everyone's scared of, and so do that first.
One last question.
Yes, please.
I'm just interested, like when you actually sit down to draw, are you now drawing on pen and paper? Are you drawing on iPad? Are you, where do you do it?
For work, it's been moving more and more digital. So I used to hate drawing on the computer, but the new iPad Pro and the pencil is phenomenal.
I got one recently. I'm like,
I was like, that's a different thing. It feels like paper. So that has changed a lot for me. I've been painting on the computer for years and years and years, so I've become accustomed to that. But drawing was always hard until now. The latency has gone away, the sense of actual weightlessness and roughness and all the things are starting to get there with iPad Pro. So that's changed a lot.
The screen, the glossy screen though, isn't it?
There's these little sheets you can put over it, and it gives a little texture, which changes it as well. So there's all these little tricks.
I'll be on Amazon just after.
Totally. Apparently the new one, I haven't used it yet. The very new one coming out is even better. The pencil is even better.
I've got the number 2.
Do you have the number 2?
And it charges with a magnet. You don't need to plug it in or anything.
That's stupid. That's the worst break-off system ever. So that's changed, but I still do personal work. When I go outside on the weekends, I paint I do pastels. Just to force me to do the hard thing again. It's going back to that same idea. Like I get lazy if I go into Photoshop. I'm like, what color do I want? Just slide it. Well, I put the saturation down, and then I know that I can infinitely adjust it. So I put an adjustment layer, repaint that layer, and with pastels you have maybe 2 layers. And your color mixing is on there, and it's all in this moment. You have to focus in a way that you don't have to focus outside of it, and it's the harder thing. And so I'm trying to keep myself challenged. And so I still do most of my personal work is traditional, except for children's books. I color them in Photoshop because it's just they want edits all the time, and it's just unreasonable.
Great.
Really cool.
Sweet.
Thanks so much.
Thanks guys. That's great.
Thank you.
Love it. Great.
Cheers,
man.
Thanks.
Cheers.